Hola mis queridos estudiantes de español y bienvenido a mi canal. Hello my lovely students and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscription button and notification bell so that you don't miss your next Spanish lesson. So in today's lesson what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the three main very important Spanish verbs: ser, estar and haber. And it's probably very confusing for you as a new learner to know when do you need to use ser, when do you need to use the verb estar, and when do you need to use the verb haber, as they all translate into English as the verb to be. So, of course, depending on the context, you will have to use a different verb each time in Spanish. So in today's lesson, I will outline what are the main differences between these three verbs and when to use them. That way, you will be more confident when to use each of these verbs in the correct context in Spanish language. The first verb that we're going to have a look at is the verb ser. So when do you have to use the verb ser? As in English, it is translated as the verb to be. So the first thing for you to remember is when you are describing someone or something, so when you are talking about the permanent characteristic of a person or a thing, it means that you will need to use the verb ser. So, for example, Ana es guapa, inteligente y cariñosa. Ana is attractive, intelligent, and caring. So when I'm describing a permanent characteristic of a person, that is when I need to use the verb ser. Or if I'm describing a permanent characteristic of a thing, I also have to use the verb ser, like in the example, este sillón es cómodo. So this chair is comfortable. So it's kind of a permanent characteristic of this thing. The second thing to remember with the verb ser is that whenever you're saying where you're from, so what is your nationality, or when you're saying what is your profession, you always need to use the verb ser. So for example, when you're saying what is your nationality, you have to use the verb ser, like in the example, Ana es de España, or Ana es española. When you're saying what is someone's profession, then you also need to use the verb ser, like Ana es doctora. Ana is a doctor. The third thing for you to remember is that when you're saying what is the time, so when you're expressing time, you also need to do this with the verb ser. Son las 12. Es la una. And the fourth category where you need to actually use the verb ser is when you're expressing possession. So like an example, este bolso es tuyo. Este bolso es tuyo. Sí, este bolso es mío. Now let's have a look at the conjugation of the verb ser. So to be able to correctly use the verb ser, you of course need to know how to conjugate it, and you need to learn different forms of the verb ser. So I am in Spanish would be yo soy or simply soy. You are, it would be tú eres. So you are in an informal way when you're talking to a familiar person would be tú eres or simply eres. If you're referring to someone in a formal situation and you want to use a polite form, then you are would be in Spanish usted es. Usted es. He is, él es, she is, ella es. We are, nosotros somos. You are, as an informal way of addressing someone as a group, vosotros sois. If you are in a formal situation and you're addressing a group and you want to sound polite, it would be ustedes son. They are, ellos son. or ellas son when you're referring only to a group of women. So the second verb that we're going to have a look at is the verb estar, which is also translated in English as the verb to be. So what is the difference between the verb ser and estar? So remember we said that we need to use the verb ser when we are describing a permanent characteristic of a person or a thing. Now with the verb estar, it's slightly different. So if I am describing a temporary characteristic of a person or a thing that is not a norm, or it's not a usual characteristic for that person or an object, then I need to use the verb estar, like in the example. Hoy Daniel está guapo, which like implies that precisely today Daniel is looking really good, but it's not like he's a permanent characteristic. Or la sopa está fría, soup is cold. So it's not a permanent characteristic for soup to be cold. I just want to emphasize that right now in this moment that the soup is cold. La sopa está fría. So the second category when you need to use the verb estar is when you are expressing location of someone or something. So for example, nosotros estamos en Madrid. We are in Madrid. Or nuestra casa está al lado del mercado. Nuestra casa está al lado del mercado. Our house is next to the market. So I'm expressing location of a person or a thing, and therefore I need to use the verb estar. And the last category that we're going to have a look at when to use the verb estar is when to express mood. So when you're expressing your mood, how you're feeling in this very moment, you need to use the verb estar. Do you remember the question, ¿Cómo estás? How are you? Now on this question, you're asking someone, how are they now? So what is their mood like now? And you would be answering this question with Estoy bien, estoy contento, and therefore you would not say soy bien or soy contento. Okay, and our third verb that also translates in English as to be is haber. So when do you use then haber? The first thing that I would like to outline is that you need to remember is that the verb haber in the present tense only has the third person of singular. So there is only one form in the present tense that you would be using, and it is I. And it is usually translated in English as the form there is or there are. It is very important for you to know the verb haber because it acts like an auxiliary verb when forming other tenses. So for example, if you're forming a past tense, pretérito perfecto, you would need to know the forms of the verb haber. When you're forming a different tense and a verb haber acts like an auxiliary verb, it means that this verb haber has a personal function, but the verb haber also has impersonal function, and we're gonna have a look at this one today. So we use impersonal form of the verb haber to express existence of something or someone. So for example, I could say, en mi ciudad hay una galería y dos museos. In my city there is a gallery and two museums. So I'm expressing that in my city there is a gallery and there are two museums. So existence of these two objects. And the second thing that you need to remember is that you need to use the verb haber when you're talking about the things that are not identified by the person who are you talking to. So what do I mean by this? So basically you need to imagine that the person who you are talking to doesn't know anything about the context of the subject that you're talking to. So for example, if I say, en mi país hay muchos olivos. In my country there are a lot of olive grows. So you need to imagine that the person who you're talking to does not have much information about the subject you are explaining. On this note, I'm gonna finish our lesson, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss your next Spanish lesson. And remember to hit the like button if you found the information in this video useful and educational, and let me know in the comment box what is for you the most confusing about the use of the verbs ser, estar and haber. Bueno, hasta luego, adiós.